Swedish-British journalist, filmmaker, political writer, and author of 5 books, Pelle Neroth Taylor, on today's News Talk, TNT.
I don't believe the British media. I'm just quoting them because it shows what the state of the deep state in the UK is thinking. They say, we can win now if we just give them the missiles, the long-range missiles, if the Germans give their Taurus missiles. And we've already destroyed there's a ferry now between Crimea and the land and the mainland, which they've destroyed. So the British think they're winning the Battle of the Black Sea. Do you think are they too optimistic?
On one hand, I love the British because they motivate the Ukrainians to continue their fighting. But all specialists, also the British experts, know that it's very, very difficult to change the overall military situation over there. Apart from many other things, one big problem of the Ukrainian is the availability of personnel, for instance. More than 700,000 men who are fit for military service have left the country. I mean, more than 200,000 of them are living in Germany and getting citizen payments and so on, and enjoy their life and look for a new life. That's understandable from a human point of view, but it makes the situation of the Ukraine not better. And our weapon systems are very modern, they are good, and the Ukrainians also using them very properly, but they cannot change the overall situation. Even long-range rockets like the Taurus system could not change the situation, but they have they are escalating the conflict. This is the danger, and that we widen the conflict, and that in the end we have a European war against Russia, and nobody wants that. I mean, I don't see anybody in NATO who wants a real war against Russia, but some media feel themselves as in a war, and they have a lot of fun with that.
Want to be part of the conversation? Then let us know on the TNT Interactive Live Chat Room at tnt.news. Lighting the fuse for freedom. Today's News Talk, TNT.
Welcome back to the Pelle Neroth Taylor Show. Well, you've got Jarrett Stepman with us, who's a columnist for the Daily Signal, a great website and a news source. He's also the author of The War on History, The Conspiracy to Rewrite America's Past, which I advise you to check out and I've had a look at. Certainly a war on history. Well, we've certainly got something that looks like the war on facts and war on truth been going on for the last couple of years with the Democratic Party in the center of that and the deep state. Welcome to the show, Jarrett.
Al, thank you very much. It's good to be back on.
What were your thoughts? By the way, have you got a solidarity poster or something in the background there? Solidarność.
I do. That is, in fact, a solidarity poster for the end of the Cold War in Poland, given to by a good friend at my wedding. So my wife's family's from Poland, so we know a lot about that history.
I was actually married to a Polish lady, so now we're not going to spend the next 20 minutes talk about Poland. Change of subject. No, seriously, actually, we could talk about that because I didn't have a chance to talk about it because I have a lot of thoughts about communism and the end of communism and all the rest of it, and the Poles are quite immune to it. But anyway, Jarrett, so the DNC convention, have you been following it, and what do you make of it?
Yeah, it's I have been following it rather closely. Certainly, my colleagues at Daily Signal have been covering it, I think, pretty nonstop since this began. I think what this is an attempt to do is to recreate the sort of hope and change vibe of 2008 at the DNC, this creation. I mean, people talked about the vibes election to kind of move away from the issues-based maybe elections of the past into something where we're supposed to accept Kamala Harris's nomination as an inevitability, that she'll simply rise to the presidency, that good times are here, that it's all smiles, and that they're bringing the politics of joy back to the American people. But it's been very, I think, devoid of issues, certainly the big issues that concern the American people. And I think that's very much cultivated. I think that's been a media creation since Harris was essentially announced as the Democrat candidate. I think they've wanted to essentially run an issue-less campaign, just essentially say, well, the good times are here, forget about all the bad times under Biden, that we have nothing to do with that, and we're just going to move along.
Photograph taken by Darnell, who's an NBC camera. This is a still of a video of a video. You didn't have video then, but film, a
16
news
millimeter
clip,
film, yeah.
newsreel that NBC still hosts, and which now Congress is trying to get released. For some reason, unfathomable reason, NBC have declined to release this. So we've been frustratingly short of the full resolution required to see if it was Oswald or not. But if you look at the picture, you can actually see, although the face is blurred, it looks like Oswald. I mean, it's got his body shape, and it's got his hair shape and hairline. And it said I'll just get it summarized. So it looks like him. And we've got two written notes, one from Will Fritz, handwritten, and one from Hosty, another handwritten thing, which you discovered, saying the Fritz note said that he was out there with Shelley, and he wouldn't have, Shelley was his
in front. Outside, in front with Bill Shelley. That's what he said.
And he wouldn't have known that. I mean, presumably, one counter argument would be, well, Oswald said that without. He was lying, right? So he could have been lying. So those notes on their own are not determinative, but combined with the fact that it looks like Oswald, although there's a blur in the face, those three bits of evidence.
Marina recognized him as well without prompting. Said Italy, just like when we shared some enlargement prints, and we sent them over, and we didn't even ask her, who do you think this is? She just went, yes, hello, blah, yes, Italy. That was it. Boom.
My people were from South Carolina, so the real Carolina, as some people might say.
Okay, we're gonna have someone on from North Carolina, and we can have you duke it out over North Carolina versus South Carolina. I love that kind of stuff, actually. Particularist cultural analysis. Anyway, you're in a foreign country now, Kentucky, I guess, but you've got this pipecottage.com website and podcast. What got you into this? I mean, are you a great pipe smoker yourself, sir?
Oh, yes. I thoroughly enjoy smoking a pipe, and it's one of the most contemplative activities that a person can enjoy. I just finished speaking at a conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it looked like I was at a pipe show because everybody was there reading G.K. Chesterton and Hilaire Belloc and all of these wonderful people, and they enjoyed pipes and cigars along the way. And I think that pipe smoking is attractive to reflecting people who enjoy sort of an intellectual lifestyle. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think Elon woke a lot of these guys up. Like, what the hell are we doing siding with these Democrats that are pushing war, that are pushing open borders, that are pushing, lawfare, that where you take out your enemy. I think they just, when Elon stood up with Trump and got on that stage, that woke some of these guys up. Like, what am I doing with these Democrats? They're so corrupt. They're so corrupt. And Elon also opened up Twitter better. It's not, I don't think it's still totally open, but it's so much better that we can now get information. I get a lot of information from Twitter now. For what I report, I try to decipher that and then report on that and share that in my show weekdays. But So,
do you think that the mainstream American press or the legacy media, they've been chastened a little bit by what's going on X about the Trump's victory and so on? Because Europe is still in Europe is still in 2017. America seems to have moved on a little bit about. I mean, you're in a different information space. I mean, I've talked to so many Americans the last few months doing the TNT show and so on. I got onto Americans' mind, and I think that you're much freer in your minds, much more open to different possibilities, and you're really questing. You sometimes entertain things that go too far, but that's okay because it'll be resolved through discussion and inquiry.
That's right.
In Europe, we're much more closed-minded.
Yeah. No, I agree. We're seeing these reports coming out of the UK where people are getting arrested for a tweet or whatever. It's just that.
So what do you reckon? Do you think, tell us a little bit about wind power and if it's offshore wind power, which still seems to be fascinate politicians, but is not such a good energy source. What say you?
Well, I agree with that. It's not a good energy source. The winds are stronger, more consistent offshore, but the costs of putting these enormous wind turbines out there is incredible. I'm not real good at converting everything into meters, but we're talking about towers that are taller than the Washington Monument or the Eiffel Tower by far. They're taller than most things we can imagine out there. Just the wind turbine blades are 350 feet long. That's more than the diagonal across a soccer pitch. And each blade weighs 140,000 pounds. This project off Massachusetts is only about 70 turbines. And yet President Biden, Vice President Harris have been pushing for a program for 30,000 megawatts, which means 2,500 offshore wind turbines, each one of them that tall, 850 feet tall.
This guy, well, we know that Thomas Crooks was in a BlackRock video 2 years ago, and BlackRock, of course, have huge investments in Ukraine. And we've got this guy who's in Ukraine, obviously, but he was in another film, promoting the Azov battalion. Some people on Twitter say that it was actually BlackRock, but I can't find anything backing this up. It's kind of Ukraine is kind of overhanging all these two shooters. And of course, I mean, it all reminds me a little bit of the Cuba issue back in the 1960s, once sort of JFK surrendered, as it were, in Cuba, he had the Cubans after him, until death, basically. And some people said that they were among the assassins. What about the Ukraine connection?
Yeah, well, and it also reminds me of the United States involvement with Nicaragua for many years. Remember, there was a soldier of fortune named Eugene Hasenfuss who was captured in the field there, and his capture led to a domino effect that helped us to find out more and more about how we were involved with the Contras in Nicaragua and how much we were involved with them, and all the laws that were being broken to fund them. The thing, Pelle, about Ukraine is just like what you talked about, just like Bay of Pigs in Cuba and just like the Contras in Nicaragua. Whenever an ally of the United States is fighting a war like this, it attracts soldiers of fortune. It attracts people also who are not all that stable. And I get a bad feeling in my stomach that perhaps U.S. authorities, either in the FBI or maybe even higher up than that, saw people like this guy and thought to themselves, he could potentially be useful at another time. Let's keep him on a long leash. Let's see who else he engages with. Let's see what else happens. And it may be that he's yet another one of these assets that got out of hand.
Martin, if I could just ask you a final question. I mean, Trump is known as an impatient guy, and he's also flexible and fast moving, and he wants movement. And do you think these tariffs are a kind of exploratory move, and he'll rescind them if it doesn't work and try something else? Because you can just magic it away. It's not like building things, it's an instant decision, and an instant decision can be rescinded. And then he'll try something else, or he'll get the political coverage or political license to do something else if this fails.
Well, look, most like putting the 20% on Europe is mostly for negotiation, to force them to not retaliate with more tariffs, but to say, hey, look, okay, fine, let's negotiate this out. That's what his style really is. Okay. And you can tell 10%, that's a tariff. You go above 10%, that's political.
Right. Okay.
So, I mean, you have to look at this that way. He's trying to get that, but there's another whole level that's not even being discussed, and that's quality controls. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the EU can say, well, no agriculture if it's grown with a fossil fuel based, fertilizer that we're outlawing. So then they can just outlaw that product from coming in. Forget tariffs. So that's another layer to it.
It's a sort of secret tariff in a way.
Yes.
Yeah, right. And Europe's very good at that.
Geopolitical commentator and investigative journalist. You're listening to Pelle Neroth Taylor on today's News Talk TNT.
Welcome to the Pelle Neroth Taylor Show on this Friday afternoon. Well, I remember sitting out the whole COVID scare, if you like, or scamdemic or pandemic in Sweden, which was a little haven of rationality. Swedes do a lot of other things wrong, but here we were going to restaurants, enjoying our mask-free, lockdown-free existence. Schools were open, all the rest of it. Why was the rest of the world so irrational? Well, there are little pockets of good common sense, and one of those pockets was represented by Pierre Curie and his colleagues and team of the COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, called FLCCC. And I remember him standing, I think was it outside the Capitol building, trying to advocate for ivermectin, which the mainstream media had called a horse dewormer. But the guy who discovered it actually won a Nobel Prize, and it's been used for decades against river blindness, and actually was the medicine that a cheap generic medicine that could have stopped this whole farrago in its tracks. There would have been no need for ventilators, vaccines, all the rest of it. So he's a hero in my eyes, and we're very pleased to have him today because we're going to talk about his other bombshells that he's going to drop into the world of the staid and corrupt world of the pharmaceutical industry. Welcome to the show, Pierre.
Welcome. Thanks. Good to be here. Appreciate it.
So you've written a book about ivermectin, and we'll talk about that maybe later, but it's a rather old story by now. But I mean, what I'm looking forward to with RFK, who's been sort of on his own journey for a long time because of his vaccine skepticism, which has been controversial. Now he's going to join the Trump team, and there's talk about reforming the whole agricultural, the food system, the health system, and so on. And all these things that were kept quiet about, or not seen as good to talk about, or serious topics, are now up for debate. And you've been researching and talking about one of them, which is cancer, and how the standard model for cancer is not quite fit for purpose. And there's another model that works much better, and we can actually cure it much more easily. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting topic. I'm not an oncologist, but my colleague Paul, who I started the FLCCC with, he got really interested in cancer and started reading a lot of the research behind cancer. And one of the most amazing stories he uncovered, which is that I would say around 14 years ago, the prevailing model of what causes cancer, what drives cancer, has been upended. I mean, the science is really clear. For 70 plus years now, the entire scientific world has been obsessed with this idea that cancer arises from genetic mutations. And it's simply false. That's not what causes cancer. It's a consequence of a preceding event, which has a metabolic origin, which is to say that it's a defect in the mitochondria. Mitochondria is the energy forming units of the cell. And when you have the furnace, so to speak, of the cell that provides all the energy, when that starts to become defective, the mutations are downstream from that. And it's really important because so much of oncology's research is trying to counteract these mutations. And it's I would say somewhat of a fruitless exercise. There's been a couple of very modest successes with that scientific understanding, but overall, cancer has been stagnant. I mean, if you look at the survival rates of cancer over the last 30 years, in terms of with chemotherapy, literally it's increased survival by like 3.2 months. That's 30 years of research. We're doing so poorly in cancer. And, with this model called the metabolic model, and I won't get too geeky here, we're discovering all of these different approaches, these mechanisms of action of particularly repurposed drugs, off-patent drugs that are already been used for decades that have anti-tumor properties. Some of them have been proving to be really quite effective, and I'm treating a fair amount of cancer in my practice now, complementary to standard of care. I use a lot of different approaches, dietary interventions, and numerous repurposed medicines and nutraceuticals. And we're doing a study on it, and it's just a really exciting area. But I'll just finish here, Pelle. The idea, the knowledge that this somatic mutation model has been upended is very little known. It's just has not made widespread impact. It's just another scientific kind of discovery that's been suppressed.
Welcome back to the Pelle Neroth Taylor Show. Well, the theme is drag queens and the debasement of our culture. And with us to talk more about that, and I think you saw the Olympic show in Disgust, is Mary Rook. She's a Catholic mum of 4, and she is the author of the Daily Callers column featuring based takes on modern-day insanities. And she also writes analysis for Patriot subscribers, and you can find her on Mary Rook on Twitter. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So, did you watch that Paris Olympics opening show, and what did you make of it?
Of course, I watched it with shock and horror. I mean, how could you not? You're watching these people just completely strip Christianity, from the Olympics. We all saw at the beginning there was, a bit of an outrage over them removing the cross at the top of their emblem that they had going over it. And then that was set the stage for what we were going to see in the opening. It wasn't even just the Last Supper that struck me. There was a part that has not left my mind since I've seen it. And there were 3 people walking up the steps of what looked like a Paris apartment. And it was a man, two men and a woman. One was definitely a masculine man, and then obviously a woman, and then a man that looked like he was maybe gender neutral or, you know, kind of dressing in drag. He had makeup all over his face, and what looked like they were about to partake in a threesome. We're talking about little kids from around the world are watching the Olympics because this is the time when the world comes together and puts their best athletes out to show how strong their country is. And, you know, it's supposed to be a point of patriotism and pride. And instead, they're telling us that, you know, nothing is more important than whatever our sexual fetish is at the time. And I think that is such a disgusting way to look at our culture. And it's definitely a disgusting, you know, way to teach our children that this is how we should be acting in public. And then this is what we should be celebrating.